The NFL draft has happened. 7 Bama players ended up drafting. Transfer portal closed. Nobody left Alabama. We're going to talk about that and more right here on Cover Crimson, brought to you by our friends over at Pearl River Resort and Philadelphia, Mississippi, the Timeout Sports Lounge, Dancing Rabbit Golf Course. All right, let's get this thing started. All right, roll tide, everybody. Thanks for hanging out with us on Cover Crimson, covercrimson.com. And with Clint Lamb, I'm Mick Gillispie. Recapping the draft. 7 Bama players got taken, 2 first-round picks. Jalen Milroe was drafted by the Seahawks along with Robbie Oots. Some guys didn't get drafted. But your thoughts on the 7 that are going to the NFL?
It kind of, for the most part, played out the way that we thought it would. At one point, we talked about on the show, thought that it was very possible that Robbie Oots could end up going ahead of C.J. Dupree. He ended up going in the 5th round to the Seattle Seahawks, actually going to the same place as Jalen Milroe. C.J. Dupree ends up going undrafted, ends up signing an undrafted free agent contract with the New England Patriots. But like Jalen Milroe, here's the thing about him. Based off of my evaluation of him and where I thought he would go, it always felt like the 3rd round was the sweet spot. 2nd round was possible. I also acknowledged that the beginning of day 3, so the 4th round would also be possible. But it just felt like once you get to that 3rd round, you've had a couple of picks, sometimes even, 3, maybe even 4 picks, but at least bare minimum 2. You can take a risk on a guy who's very toolsy, a lot of upside. But, as people talk more, and some people were saying it's potential, he could potentially go in the 1st round. You have people saying, hey, he was invited to the draft for a reason. It's like, okay, I never could get on board with the 1st round. I acknowledged it as a possibility, but I'm like, okay, maybe 2nd round is kind of that sweet spot for him, and that's where the expectations could be. And I even climbed as high as to say it's possible that the beginning of the 2nd round, the New York Giants, the Cleveland Browns, they were both sitting up there. It's like, it's certainly possible. Ends up falling to kind of the range that we had thought that he would go in. Jihad Campbell ends up falling a little bit later to the back half of the 1st round when a lot of people thought he'd go closer to the top half, mostly because of that shoulder injury. Tyler Booker gets probably drafted a little sooner than people thought. Malachi Moore, I thought he ended up in a really good landing spot, got a clear path to playing time with the New York Jets. Maybe not as a starter. They've got those guys kind of locked in. But as far as being like that safety 3 rotational piece, think he ended up in a good spot. Q Robinson was probably one of my favorite picks for Alabama in this entire draft, going to the Denver Broncos at number 134 overall in the 4th round. I think, and I mentioned this yesterday on Twitter, Mick, you probably do, but do you remember the name Mark Anderson?
Yeah.
Mark Anderson was a defensive end pass rusher for Alabama back on that 2005 defense. That's really where I started to kind of really get into Alabama football. He was one of my favorite players, ended up getting drafted in the 5th round by the Chicago Bears. And despite the fact that he was a day 3 draft pick, or it actually might have been day 4 back then. But he ended up having 12 sacks as a rookie as a situational pass rusher, ended up finishing 2nd in defensive rookie of the year voting behind D'Amico Ryans, who finished 1st. And while he never really matched that level of production until much later in his career when he was with the New England Patriots and had another double-digit sack season, it was kind of like he kind of burst onto the scene there as a rookie and really made his presence known. I think Q Robinson, with his pass rushing chops, you're going to get much bigger special teams impact from day 1, but I have not felt this good about an Alabama day 3 pass rusher doing what Mark Anderson did as a rookie than I have for Q Robinson. I really think that the injury probably held him down to day 3, probably would have went, day 2 otherwise. But I thought he ended up in a good spot there with the Broncos. They could certainly use the help situationally. Tim Smith going to the Indianapolis Colts in the 6th round. Kind of thought 5th, 6th round for him was kind of the sweet spot. So that kind of plays. It was an interesting draft because of where some of these Alabama players went as far as the landing spots. The Seattle Seahawks, like with Jalen Milroe, I actually like it, because I've talked a lot about how you wanted a starter entrenched. You didn't want him going to the Pittsburgh Steelers necessarily, where you don't know. I mean, Mason Rudolph could be the short-term answer. Maybe they're able to hold off and not start Milroe too soon. But, that was kind of one where it's like he could end up getting forced into action sooner rather than later. The Saints needed a quarterback, a more immediate guy. Tyler Shuck feels a lot more like that guy. He's an older prospect. Outside of injuries, he's a little bit more ready to go. So, didn't end up going there. But Sam Darnold being their starting quarterback, at least for 2025, more than likely for 2025 and 2026, that gives Milroe time to develop, sit, learn, adjust. Clint Kubiak being the offensive coordinator, I think he's a pretty good offensive mind, so that's good from that aspect. Greg Zabel, Gray Zabel from North Dakota State. He ended up going in the first round, an offensive lineman who's really going to help their offensive line. So they're addressing the protection up front. So I just think that was a good landing spot for him. But I liked how the draft turned out for Alabama, despite the fact that this was the fewest players that Alabama has had drafted, or it ties for the fewest since 2011 when they had 5. So in 2022, they had 7. In 2016, they had 7. And in 2015, they had 7. Otherwise, they were always above that, but that's since 2011 when they had 5. So what are your thoughts on that, on the fact that there were fewer players?
I mean, I don't know if I should be worried or not. I mean, I guess initially I'm like, well, maybe it's one of those years where you had some guys. I feel like those years where they had less guys, they had a lot of like upper end players, and then maybe they had like underclassmen that wanted to come back. I hope that we're not trending out of being one of those destinations where you're going to have a lot of top picks. And I just worry about that. I guess I believe in Coach DeBoer and his staff and their ability to recruit and everything. But at the same time, you worry like, hey, hopefully we're not trending away, or maybe teams are trending away from it because you're not able to keep talent on because so many guys transfer out if they can go somewhere else and play right away.
And that was my initial thought too. And so I don't blame you at all. I started thinking back because Ohio State was sitting there with 14 reigning national champions. Georgia had 13 right behind them, Texas behind them, kind of your usual suspects there at the top. Oregon sitting there with 10, ranked 4th most. Ole Miss had 8. And then you had 5 schools, Alabama, Florida, LSU, Michigan, and Miami, all sitting there at 7 players drafted. And so I'm like, okay, not bad, but relative to where Alabama typically is, that's maybe not great. But then you start thinking about, okay, there have been plenty of years where that has happened with Alabama. Like I said, there was 3 or 4 times dating back to 2011. But I think it more so speaks to the number of guys who elected to come back. Like that was kind of Ohio State last year, right? Where you had a lot of players who were looking to make an NFL draft decision ultimately choose to come back. I mean, what happens if Jam Miller, Jeremy Bernard, Parker Brailsford, Jaden Roberts, LT Overton, Deontay Lawson, he probably would have been gone without the injury, kind of forced to come back, but that's another guy. Justin Jefferson, Damani Jackson, Keon Sabb. So, like, there's just so many players that really could have pushed that number up. I mean, I almost guarantee you most, if not all of those guys would have gotten drafted had they, elected to come out. Instead, they choose to come back. That's automatically going to drop Alabama's number. Otherwise, they probably would have been sitting bare minimum closer to double digits, more than likely would have been up there in the Texas, Georgia, Ohio State range with anywhere from 12 to 14. So I think it more so, and this is what I kind of wanted to talk about. Alabama had no players enter the transfer, no scholarship players enter the transfer portal during the spring window. So you've got that element of it where it's kind of showing loyalty. Guys want to stick around. But then on the other side of it, you also have guys who could have gone to the NFL draft who elected not to, who chose to come back. That's another sign of guys wanting to stick around and play for Kalen DeBoer, this coaching staff, and stay at Alabama. Plus, you've got coaches, and we've already talked about, Nick Sheridan choosing to stick around after he lost his offensive coordinator job. Across the board, there's a lot of signals saying guys want to show loyalty to Kalen DeBoer, show loyalty to this coaching staff. And so while that was my initial thought as well, I actually think it's reason for optimism and not reason for concern.
I mean, look, I spent the weekend at the Floribama. I got a chance to talk to Bray Hubbard and
Very
Hollywood
cool.
Williams and Jalen Mbakwe and little Dre Kirkpatrick Jr. Right, and they're all young guys. I mean, they're all underclassmen, right? And they got 2 more years left at least. So maybe that is a good sign. Like, look, we got some young players that have a lot of eligibility left, and maybe that's why you don't have as many guys. I mean, talk about Isaiah Bond. He should have been the star receiver on this team, but after Gravedigger, instead of his business manager saying, "Hey, we got an opportunity here to cash in on one of the greatest moments in Iron Bowl history, we're going to transfer to Texas. We're going to transfer to Texas because that's going to give us a better opportunity to get drafted. We're going to leave Alabama because they don't know how to develop wide receivers, Clint. We're going to leave Alabama because what the hell does Alabama know about wide receivers? And we're going to go to Texas. A month after Gravedigger, where for the rest of your life you could have cashed in by writing your name under that picture, whether it be one from Daniel Moore or an actual autograph, or an actual picture that you would autograph. Instead, you left to go to Texas because you were going to be developed better at Texas.
It's pretty interesting, isn't it? Let's paint the entire picture. There are sexual assault allegations, which is why he hadn't even signed, to my knowledge, last I checked, with an NFL team as an undrafted free agent. That probably pushed him all the way down to being undrafted. Someone would have taken a chance despite the lack of production. Now, he actually started off last year for Texas pretty decently, ended up dealing with an injury. I think it was a high ankle sprain, grade 3. That's something that you got to play through. It's a nagging injury. So that kind of affected things as well. But here's the thing. He was already projected to have fallen before, like, the sexual assault allegations came forward, kind of just where things were trending. Maybe if he would have stayed on the pace that he would have been on at the beginning of last year, maybe he would have been up there continuing to be in that wide receiver, round 1 conversation. But the bottom line is if he would have been in Tuscaloosa, he would have had Jalen Milroe as his quarterback, who, obviously had some limitations as a passer. But, I think what's unfortunate for him, and, some people actually might celebrate this in a lot of ways, but he's now positioned himself where he's now gone undrafted. You don't even know if he's going to end up with a team, but even if he does, if he gets cleared of these charges, whatever, if he ends up with a team, he's gone undrafted. Is Texas ever really going to claim him as being kind of one of their guys? I mean, it was like he was a mercenary. Like, we keep talking about how that's kind of college football right now. He's kind of the definition of it. He goes there for 1 year. He doesn't really produce, mostly because of injuries. And so he's kind of ends up being kind of a forgotten man. So you don't have that from Texas. You no longer have that from Alabama when you would have had that. And you go undrafted where you really don't have that loyalty from an NFL fan base. Maybe if you got clear of these charges, you got on the field, you produced, you got to a second contract, you get a huge payday. By that point, maybe you would. But right now, he has fallen a long, long way. And a lot of that is very self-inflicted. It was his decision to transfer, but also it was his decision potentially with whatever happened with those allegations, which I'm not going to speak one way or another. I know that the text messages don't look great for him, but I'll let that play out. But it's just, this was a guy, you're right, he was at his peak after the Gravedigger play. And really since then, not a whole lot has gone right for Isaiah Bond.
Look, I'm not wishing ill will towards him at all. But, just the whole timing of that seemed like a bad idea. And, and you look at it now and it's like, nothing went right. Should have just stayed in Tuscaloosa. But,
I mean,
whatever. I mean, it is what it is, right?
And, a guy like Trey Amos, he got drafted at the bottom of the second round. Now, granted, there were some people, myself included, who thought he would go a lot higher than that, maybe even the back half of the first round. But he still was a day 2 draft pick, about a mid-day 2 draft pick. And I would say considering you transfer from Alabama, that's still good. Like, you go out there, you perform on the field, you end up being a starter for Ole Miss. Ole Miss was competitive as well. You end up getting drafted in the second round. So from his standpoint, good for him. Like, that's kind of, I mean, would he have been, it's possible he would have been drafted just as high, because I think it's possible. Like, Xavier Brown was really good as a freshman, good enough to play. But if you had Trey Amos and you would have had Damani Jackson, more than likely those would have been your two starters. Trey Amos probably would have produced for Alabama as well, probably would have still found himself in a similar situation. So I guess he got the more immediate payday from Ole Miss. That on top of kind of being drafted probably in the same range you would have, doesn't really make a difference for him. But for a guy like Isaiah Bond, you see this a lot, man. Texas was excited about Ajayi Hall. They were excited about Jaleel Billingsley. They were excited about Amari Niblack. There are a lot of players that go a lot of places, and some of them pan out. Caleb Downs, Trey Amos, there are examples, but there's also a lot of examples of them not panning out. So it's like Kalen DeBoer said, the grass isn't always greener, and I think that the players are buying into that statement because it's being reflected by guys sticking around.
Yeah, and I wanted to get into that because nobody transferred. I want to bring that up. A couple things, though, before we go there. We're brought to you by Pearl River Resort over in Philadelphia, Mississippi. Go check it out. Hour and a half from Tuscaloosa, 2 hours change from Birmingham. It's golf time. The weather's fantastic. Dancing Rabbit Golf Course is the Augusta that you can play. You don't need a membership. The Azaleas, the Oaks, two amazing golf courses. You go over there, you do the golf thing, have your steak dinner at Philip M. Steakhouse, which you won't be disappointed, and the chowder. Get the chowder. Coker sat down at the table. We said, get the chowder. All of us had the chowder. He eats the chowder. He's like, I can't believe this. It's the best chowder I've ever had. I know. That's how they do it here. But you got the sports book, which is the Golden Moon Casino, table games and slots. Really the collection of slots that it blows out anybody else in the state. And we appreciate them for being here and being a part of what we do and talking Alabama on a daily basis. The other thing I wanted to get your thoughts on is this Shedeur Sanders thing. 5th round pick, thought he was going to be a first rounder. Coach Prime, I'm on the side of him. I like him. I wanted to see him do well. His dad was one of my favorite football players. I know I take a lot of crap from my friends because I do pull for Coach Prime, but this kind of seems like to me that maybe Coach Prime probably should have kept some of the comments that they were going to be hard to sign, that they were going to try to dictate where they went in the draft, because it feels like a little collusion here, like where they were like, hey, we're not going to draft the best player, or maybe they didn't want to draft him because they didn't take the process seriously. But to see this guy fall all the way to the 5th round, it seems crazy to me.
Well, I think it's a combination of factors, Mick. Part of it is that Shedeur isn't the top 5 talent that some people built him up to be. That's the bottom line. The people who do this every year, and I'm not saying that they're all correct. They miss too. So, but a vast majority of them have said, and I completely agree, I had a round 2 grade on him. He felt like a round 2 talent. I've talked in the past, you've got to have at least one bona fide elite trait, typically, to get drafted in the 1st round. With him, he's good at a lot of things, but I don't think he has that one elite trait. Like, it's the reason that while I had Jalen Milroe behind him, I had Jalen projected as a round 3 guy, was, because of where Shedeur was at as far as being ready. But as far as ceilings are concerned, Jalen Milroe's ceiling is on a completely different level than Shedeur's because of 2 things. 1, he brings elite athleticism and rushing ability. And 2, he brings elite arm strength. Neither one of those 2 things Shedeur has. Now, Shedeur's processing is better right now. I think his accuracy, his mechanics, his ball placement, better than Milroe's right now. He is more ready to contribute now than Milroe. But I just never felt like he was a round 1 guy. A lot of people felt that way. So when you start there, you start saying, okay, but there's a lot to like. I still think he can be a starting quarterback, a mid-level starting quarterback in the NFL if things go right for him. But when you're not viewed through that lens of potentially being a star quarterback in the NFL, there's a lot less headache that NFL teams are going to be willing to put up with when it comes to you. And some of that is self-inflicted. Some of it's Deion Sanders, and that's really not Shedeur's fault. It's that Deion has made comments, and he's going to be a guy that's going to put his opinion out there. If Shedeur's going through training camp and he ends up not being the starter, someone's going to ask Deion about that. And what's Deion going to say? Is he going to bash your head coach? Is he going to bash your GM? Hey, you're not putting the talent around him. He has no chance of being successful. He might not say that, but he might. And now you've got a headache. Now it's a distraction. Now you're getting asked about it. It's a problem, a potential problem. Some of it's Shedeur and the way that he handled himself in some of these interviews. They did not go well for him, according to reports. And then there's the element of the media that is not Shedeur's fault as well. Now, they feed into that media a lot, but it's kind of, and this is where I made the comparison to Tim Tebow, where it's something that Tim Tebow couldn't control. And that was that the media became obsessed with his story. And they were all about that's what got them clicks. If you put Tim Tebow in a headline, you were getting an article clicked, you were getting a video clicked. And so they started becoming crazy with it. And as long as he's your starter, that's fine. But if he ends up being your backup, which I think a lot of these NFL teams thought, low-level starter, more than likely going to be a career backup, if that is the case, then you don't want to have that guy constantly being everybody. Oh, the media wants to talk to him. The media is talking. The fan base starts saying, we want Shedeur. Let's say that the Browns right now, they throw Joe Flacco out there and Joe throws a couple of picks in week 1. You think they're going to be saying, hey, go to Kenny Pickett, who you traded a draft pick for, a former first-round draft pick? Do you think they're going to be saying the guy who got drafted over Shedeur, Dylan Gabriel, round 3? Do you think they're going to be clamoring for him, or do you think they're going to be pushing for Shedeur? They're going to be pushing for Shedeur. Now, some of that is their belief that he is the best option in that room, period, but certainly would be the second best option. But part of it is just a lot of people are pulling for him. He's a polarizing name. And so now he might not be the quarterback 2 in Cleveland, but now the media is not asking. I mean, yesterday I saw a thing, I think it was from FanDuel, where they tweeted out and said, is he going to be the week 1 starter? And it's like, this is a 5th round draft pick who is more talented than that. But how many 5th round draft picks are you saying that about? And he's got 3 or 4 quarterbacks ahead of him on the depth chart right now. This is a question that should be asked about 2 weeks before the season opener, after he's gone out there in the preseason and in training camp. You've heard nothing but buzz. This guy's incredible. He goes out there for some preseason games. He looks incredible. Then maybe you start having that conversation. But the day after he got drafted, it's not the time for that based off of where he was drafted, the concerns. But this is the media craze with him. It's already starting. That's not Shedeur's fault. But I'm saying that this collective, all these different factors, is what caused him to fall to the 5th round. And I'm pulling for him too. I mean, I know a lot of people aren't. I'm going to criticize him when I think it's warranted. I don't think he's handled himself great. I don't think Deion's helped him. I'm going to be honest about all that. But at the end of the day, I do think that I thought he handled kind of the fall. They kept showing him, he kept saying and doing the right things. And Deion seemed really, really appreciative when Cleveland finally gave him that phone call. He was in the background saying, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. I mean, maybe there's been a humbling experience here, and he can just go put his head down, go to work. Because if he does that, I think he could be a pretty good football player. But I wasn't as shocked maybe as some others, Mick, when it comes to him falling like he did.
Yeah, it was crazy. I was, and I think he's going to do a lot better than people think. I think he's going to be a pretty good player.
He could.
I don't know that it'll be motivation, some people think maybe humbling, but the problem that he has is the way that professional sports work are the people that get paid the money are going to get the opportunity.
That's right.
So he's going to have to earn that, kind of getting out of that stage where, hey, we gave all this money to this guy, and basically he's a 5th rounder. I mean, you're just lucky to be here, to the point where he'll eventually get that contract, because money talks in pro sports, so it matters, with opportunities. But I think the kid's going to do okay, and Cleveland needed a break like this.
If he buys in, and I think that he will, and they handle this correctly, I think that this could be a break for them. Now, here's the thing. They've got some ammunition for next year and stuff. You took Dylan Gabriel and you took Shedeur Sanders. Does that take you out of the running for a quarterback next year? Probably not, but it does kind of muddy the waters a little bit. Joe Flacco's obviously short-term. Kenny Pickett, I think he's going into the final years of his contract, so it's not like they're obligated to anything for him beyond. But, he's definitely got to buy in. And another point that other people have made, and it's a great point, is that this is the first time that he's going to have faced real adversity, in the sense of Deion was his high school coach, right? Deion was his college coach at both stops. Deion always had the say, and he was always going to be the starter. There was no competition. There was no threatening him. And granted, what I will say is for a guy who's never really faced competition, the guy battles, and he's actually pretty damn competitive. And I think that's Deion because that's Deion's DNA. He was ultra competitive in everything that he did before. But that's pretty wild that a guy who's never really had to compete is as competitive as he is. But what that, a concern for NFL teams is, okay, now he's got to compete. So is he going to be willing to step up and do that instead of being handed the job? And how does he react if he's not handed the job? Not saying it's going to be poor. I'm saying these are questions that NFL teams ask themselves. So I'm with you, man. I know a lot of people are against him. I totally get it. I mean, it's easy to be against him. Also, I thought Mel Kiper's handling of the entire situation was about as unprofessional as it gets because I don't think he was arguing for Shedeur Sanders. I think he was arguing for himself because he pushed the narrative that Shedeur was far and away quarterback one in this class. He should go number one overall. The fact that didn't happen, that's fine. But when he falls all the way to the fifth round, it makes Mel Kiper look bad. And I think that is what had Mel Kiper going off as off. I mean, it dominated the draft coverage. And now we're sitting here talking about it even more and spending 10 minutes on it. But, it was a big storyline, but I didn't like how that was handled either.
Unless it was collusion. Unless there was some collusion there where he's like, oh man, there's no way, and I don't
think
know.
Fifth round is possible. It's possible.
I don't know. I think we'll find out if the guy goes out there and he turns out to be first round talent in the fifth round. And after the debacle that the Browns have had at the quarterback spot where they traded their whole team away for a guy that gets hurt and any good anymore. And they needed to break like this. We'll find out. Maybe he goes out there and he can't throw, I'll tell you this. When you look at the draft for next year and you look at Alabama, who give me like 3 or 4 guys that you think will be at the top of that list.
This is a great question, Mick, because, I think that the fact that you had so many guys coming back that could have gone, now they have a chance to elevate, right? Like an LT Overton, due to his not lack of production, but lack of sacks, he doesn't have, and Shamar Stewart ended up being drafted in the middle of the first round of the Cincinnati Bengals. Same situation, a lot of pressures, very few sacks, and that's not just this past season. That's been his entire career, but he's got freakish traits, and that helped him get drafted in the middle of the first round. I said last week, and I'll reiterate it here, LT Overton, if he would have come out this year, he would not have been a first-round draft pick. I think he's got first-round traits. I think he's got the potential to be a really good NFL starter, but he doesn't have the traits, the natural ability of a Shamar Stewart where you're going to be able to overcome that lack of production in the eyes of NFL teams. So he's got to come out to Alabama. He's got to have a good year. I think he will have a good year. Well, you'll see a different defense, in general, but his ability to finish, I think, will help him on an individual level. Here's the thing, and I've talked about this at length, and now that the 2026 way too early NFL mock drafts are coming out, and I know, go look at some of the names on that from a year ago at this time. Some of it maybe, but it normally there's a lot of changes. So you can't take everything as the gospel right now as far as who are the guys being projected up there. But what I noticed is like PFF, one of their guys put out a mock draft, and the 3 players who were in it for Alabama, and I think this has been pretty consistent, was Caden Proctor, and the PFF guy had him going number 1 overall. And I think that, people need to take notice to that. That's, we can debate that if you want, but that's, really? Absolutely. And then you had LT Overton, and then you had Deontay Lawson. Now, Deontay Lawson, hopefully he ends up looking good enough this year, coming off of that knee injury. Sometimes it takes guys a while, even though he'll be back on the field, to kind of get back. I hope he does well enough this year where teams can see what he could be. I don't really view him as a first-round draft pick right now, but I very much hope that I end up being wrong. But I still think he's going to be a hell of a player. Do not get me wrong. But, that's just – those were the 3. I think Bray Hubbard's one right now where it's like, I don't know if he ends up coming out after this year. I think he was a redshirt freshman this past season, so it'd be a redshirt sophomore. But if he ends up being the All-American that I think he can be, it is possible. And I think that if he did end up coming out and he wasn't an All-American, The only reason he would be doing that would be if he was up there as a first-round draft pick. But LT Overton, Caden Proctor, do I have him going number 1 overall? I would not have that right now. But I think he's viewed as a first-round draft pick right now. I think LT Overton's viewed that way. I think Bray Hubbard's viewed that way. I think Isaiah Horton is really positioning himself, even though he might not be Alabama's wide receiver 1 or wide receiver 2. And he's got multiple years of eligibility, but if he ends up being what we all think he could be, he's a possibility. Those would probably be my, Damani Jackson's another one just due to the freakish athleticism, the fact that he's kind of come on as far as the production, got a couple of picks this past season. If he does that again, he could very well be a first-round pick. I would probably say those are the top ones for me right now. Maybe a Quay Russaw, but Caden Proctor, LT Overton, and Bray Hubbard would probably be, and I guess I put Damani Jackson there as well. Those are the 4 top ones for me right now. Is there anybody that you would add to that?
No. And then the year after that, you look and you see Ryan Williams and Jalen Mbakwe and all that crew, so
that's right.
And now there is some talent here. I mean, no doubt about it, but it's going to take, you need to have 10 to 12 of these guys to win national championships. You just do. I mean, you look at the teams that win, and it's always the teams that have the most talent.
And I think Alabama's got a good mix where they're going to have a bunch of guys like Ohio State. I mean, I could be wrong, but they had 14 players drafted. I don't remember exactly how many. I want to say maybe 3 went first round, but then like just a flood of second round guys. And that's kind of what you really need to have. You can have those bona fide at the top. You can get 4, 5, 6 draft picks. We've seen national championship teams do that, but I think it's harder now with the transfer portal to accumulate that much talent. So that I think if you got, 3 or so first rounders, and then you can really start to hammer the day 2 guys, that's kind of, and I think Alabama's trending in a similar direction to where Ohio State was last year. And here's the other thing too. Quinn Ewers fell to the 7th round, Mick. And I thought that was really interesting because Mike Johnson actually was the one to bring this up. And I was on my way to breakfast yesterday morning and it blew me away. It was a question. I was even talked about it in the car, and I wanted to hear other people's thoughts, but he asked the question, what's stopping Quinn Ewers from going back to college right now? And I was like, well, there used to be there's a rule that once you've entered the draft and you forfeit your eligibility, but everybody that wants extra eligibility from the NCAA, you just sue them and they cave. So, I'm not saying that there's probably a lot more detail in there that I'm probably missing that would prevent it, but that's something that what if a guy like Quinn Ewers could go back? He made a colossal mistake. Texas probably wanted to move on to Arch Manning, but he should have entered the transfer portal like Carson Beck, and he would have gotten paid a lot of money. And he does not have the torque in his throws where I think he's going to end up being a good NFL player. He did get drafted. He'll have his chance, but he could have punted starting your rookie contract for another year. And he could have put probably somewhere in the neighborhood of anywhere from $3 to $4 million into his pocket extra. And then he could have taken that risk. Now he's already in the NFL starting it. And so it's time to deal. And if you don't, you're not going to be in the NFL long. And this was a guy who was once viewed as one of the most perfect prospects coming out of high school that there's ever been. So I thought that was a fascinating angle and how things worked out this weekend as well.
Yeah, I wonder if that applies to Milroe too. He wasn't going to come back to Alabama, but somebody would have taken him in a second, and he would have made more money in college than he did on draft day. He didn't fall as far as Quinn Ewers, who should have transferred. He should have transferred, no doubt about it. But the quarterbacks in this draft got no respect, man. That's crazy to me to think about. Maybe you're talking about guys draft eligible. Maybe Ty Simpson has the type of year where he's a first round pick. He's got the body. You don't have to play all these games. Just play the ones that you're in. Throw the ball, make the throws, make the reads, lead the team.
I think the only thing that's going to hold a Parker Brailsford back is his size. I think he's going to be more scheme specific, but I still think he's like a day 2 guy bare minimum who is better than that. It's just the size will hurt him. Jaden Roberts is a day 2 pick. Potentially, I've said is possible like early day 3, but it's also possible he could climb into that early day 2. I don't really see first round draft pick, but he's still a really good player. That's going to be on your offensive line. We've talked about Caden Proctor. Like, there are guys right now. He's got some potential with his offensive line. He's got plenty of weapons in the passing game. He's got a great offensive coordinator. Ty Simpson, it is very possible that he ends up being a guy who has a lot of success this season if he stays the starting quarterback. And he could kind of get, I'm not saying he'll get the Quinn Ewers treatment necessarily, but it is possible that if Keelan Russell does what he needs to do as potentially the backup this season, shows growth, the coaching staff's ready to kind of move on to him. Ty Simpson could face a similar decision next year, but I think Ty Simpson, he's got a lot more torque. He's got much better arm strength. He can make every NFL throw. I think he would be a much more desirable quarterback by, NFL evaluators, NFL decision makers. So I don't foresee that being a problem for him. So it's a matter of, I think if he's kind of projected day 2, he would probably still go, because I think he'll kind of be nudged out. It's possible that it could be nudged out the door. And it could be that he ends up being a first round draft pick, but I don't foresee him being in Quinn Ewers' situation next year. But it will be interesting because you're seeing this more and more. Like Carson Beck, I don't necessarily think Georgia wanted him back. I think they were ready to move on, and he wasn't ready to move on to the NFL, so he chose to go elsewhere. You're probably going to be seeing more of that moving forward because of what happened to Quinn Ewers. That's a great example for guys now to look at and say, don't want that happening to me, so I'll stay on the college level as long as possible unless I'm projected to go day 1.
Hey, guys, promo code ROOM20, 20% off Rowback. Got my Rowback shirt on today. Not only is it comfortable, but it looks good. Black is slimming, okay?
It is.
You gotta love black. Not to say I'm a heavy guy, but I'm definitely.
You look slimmer today, Mick. You always look slim, but you look slimmer.
And you guys can too. So take advantage of it. 20% off Rowback.com. And I'm back to go on there and shop myself because need some summer gear. All right, this is a topic that we could probably even stretch tomorrow and get into a little bit more. But just on the fact that we got it on here and it's worth just kind of touching on for a second. No players transferred from the Bama program. All you hear is that people love playing and being around Kalen DeBoer. And that's the only SEC program, Clint, I think, that didn't have anybody.
That's right. Mick, I'm telling you, there are certain signs. And so, some people would say, okay, last year there were certain signs that Kalen DeBoer can't recruit in the state of Alabama. And how wrong do people end up being on that? So it's not like this is a large enough sample size at Alabama where you can definitively say this, because we all knew that there were plenty of reasons why last year there wasn't great in-state recruiting. And now it's coming to fruition that was in fact true. That was not actually a problem with him. It was that the relationship building, you didn't have time to do it, whatever. When you talk about the way that this looks, and this is why I'm excited about it, is you're seeing it from every angle. Like I said, you're seeing it with the coaching staff. Yep. You're seeing it with guys wanting to come back who could enter the NFL draft early. And you're seeing it from the transfer portal guys who could potentially enter the transfer portal. You have some guys towards the bottom of the roster maybe that it's like, okay, I wouldn't have been shocked if they moved on. There's also guys who really are good enough to be playing for Alabama, but they're at really deep positions right now where it's like, man, I really hope Alabama doesn't lose X guy or X guy. All of them chose to come back. And that is a huge belief in not only Kalen DeBoer, but also this coaching staff. But in a transfer portal era and in an NIL era, this combination of factors is as encouraging as you could possibly get for an off-season talking point, in the sense of guys, they'd rather just keep taking the risk at Alabama with Kalen DeBoer. They trust him. They want to be in the foxhole with him. Coaches maybe could have a chance to move on and maybe be an offensive coordinator somewhere, and they're wanting to stick around, or they're really not pursuing other jobs in the offseason. Maybe if somebody approaches them, they'll entertain it, but they're not actively looking to get out of the situation. Guys that are choosing, hey, I mean, I could get drafted right now. I could get a pretty good drafts, grade, make myself a little bit of money, but you know what? I'm getting paid on the college level. And I trust that if I come back, Kalen DeBoer and this coaching staff is going to help me be in a better position next year. Like this is very exciting if you're an Alabama fan, and we'll have to wait and see if this is like the norm, but it certainly feels like it could end up being the norm. And if that happens, the other programs that are, even at the top that are dealing with guys who are wanting to get out your depth, when you can retain depth like this at some of these positions, that can make or break your season. And so, I'm as encouraged about this as I probably have been encouraged about anything when it comes to Kalen DeBoer since getting to Alabama.
Yep. Great job keeping Jalen and Bakwe, which Coker, you better check out their podcast. Made a couple of cracks about that.
Interesting.
Let me tell you, I don't know what they're going to put on there or they're not. I just sat there and helped produce it for them. It was good.
I can't wait.
Ryan Anderson and Jake Coker telling these young guys about what it takes to be successful. Loved it, man.
They're two guys who would know.
Yeah, it was cool. Hey, I want to throw out a special thank you to, first off, all the people that came up at the mullet toss and said they watch us every day. I want to shout out to them, man. It's cool to see you guys. Sorry if I didn't have a chance to spend more one-on-one time because we were doing all kind of stuff, but I really appreciate it. And I want to thank you guys. That's the first thing. And then secondly, to John McKinnis, Cam, and Pat, the owners of the Floribama, our buddy Steve Powers, and Jen Parnell, who I was down there with this weekend, including me and the mullet toss, Jake Coker and Ryan Anderson. It was a blast, man. It was just so good. But being part of that Floribama family is awesome, and that includes our channel. Like, they do anything for us, and we did our show from there, Clint, on Friday. It was really a great experience. But I just want to say thank you to those guys. I had Coker, and I let him off the hook. He made a mistake with the throw, and my fish exploded. I think it went 8 feet.
It exploded? Did you squeeze too hard?
I was so amped that I squeezed the fish too hard and it just blew up.
You gotta.
And I wouldn't do 2 throws because I wasn't going to give him another throw.
Oh, okay.
It was a DQ. It counted as a DQ
because you exploded your fish.
Yeah, because I knew I could, and he knew it. I could see the fear in his eyes. But we'll talk about that on Elephant in the Room, guys. Make sure you like and subscribe. Be part of our channel. Thumbs up here, and I've got a video out of me interviewing the guys in Bakwe and Little Dre and Hollywood. I talked to Bray Hubbard. I'll probably put some of that stuff out on Mick the Broadcaster on Instagram, so you can check it out there. But hey, Clint, what do we got at covercrimson.com?
Yeah, we're just continuing our conversation about the NFL draft. A lot of what we talked about today is going to be going up there. Now it's time, though. Transfer portal's closed. It is possible that Alabama adds some players at this point, which I think is very possible. Could be, an offensive lineman, could be a defensive lineman, punter, very far outside chance of maybe a quarterback 4. But, we're anything that breaks and happens on that front, we're going to be covering it over there. But also going to be doing the updated roster where it stands, how many scholarships they got available. But also it's about time to getting into the post-spring depth chart. So that'll be coming. Probably going to give it 1 or 2 more days to see if anybody else, we start hearing some connections. And if we do, I might wait another day to see if anything happens on it. But otherwise, I'm just going to go ahead and move forward, do some updated depth chart projections, going to go really in depth. Everything that happened in the spring, you're going to know exactly position by position where Alabama stands, where things are trending. And so I think it'll be a great conversation, Nick.
Awesome. Well, guys, thank you again. Roll Tide, and we'll talk to you tomorrow right here on Cover Crimson. And check us out at covercrimson.com. 25% off the annual subscription, $75 for the entire year. That's less than a cup of coffee. Famously said. Hey, we appreciate Pearl River too, by the way. They've been great to us, and you guys will have an awesome time. They got everything you need over there. Dancing Rabbit Golf Course, 2 awesome casinos, Silver Star and Golden Moon. They got the sports book. They got the spa. They got Geyser Falls, the water park. So I'm gonna show you a guy jumping in a pool, and we're out of here.
River Resort.